We like to call it the Supernatural Hour. And now, our hosts.
Welcome to the Supernatural Hour podcast. I'm Raven.
I'm Rogue.
I'm Chad.
This is Doc.
So tonight we're going to be talking about kind of two things. They go hand in hand. And if you've kind of studied one and researched the other, I don't know, I couldn't figure out a good way to really separate it without touching back and forth on each one. So we're going to talk tonight a little bit about child spirits and children that can see spirits. Because almost every website I looked at to get just some additional information kind of touched on both.
And in that investigation you just did that we just talked about, there was a child spirit involved there. Is that correct?
Yes.
This topic fits right in.
Right. And the child spirit didn't really do much. He was actually pretty quiet.
Right. Child spirit was the one that was through the shampoo bottle, correct? Just was playing.
Yeah, just playing. So I kind of have issues with child ghosts. Just with my religious background, I think anything before the age of 8 isn't going to hang around. It's just going to go to heaven. That's just what I believe.
Okay.
Just my doctrine. But all of the child spirits I have dealt with say that they are in that 9, 10, 11-year-old range. I've never run across one that claims to be younger. And if they did, I would call BS.
Interesting.
Demon.
I was going to, exactly.
Yep.
The concern about the demon acting as the child.
Yep. So there's a couple theories out there. There's a couple ways I can wrap my head around a child spirit. And just doing some reading, several people also agree with this theory, is that spirits can visit humans the way they
appeared in life.
So let's say that someone had a child that died. They're not going to come to you as an adult spirit because you look at them, if they came to you in the middle of the night, you'd be like, whoa, who are you, dude? Get out of my room. But if they came to you as you last knew them, you'd recognize them, you wouldn't be afraid.
Right. The house that I grew up in was haunted. We saw that as a child. We seen it as an adult. So I've witnessed that personally. I'd like to think it was the same ghost appearing in different ways.
Right. I also think that a spirit, I think a spirit has free agency. And when they pass, they can say, I don't want to cross over right now, for whatever reason. Maybe it's I'm scared to cross over. Maybe it's, there's I want to stay here with my family. I'm not ready. A myriad of different reasons. I think, too, that it's possible that if you don't want to go and you're comfortable as that child spirit, you can maintain that child spirit look. And some religious theologian might come and pat me on the head and say, no, you're wrong. Whatever. It's a theory. I've got several theories here.
Or still a traumatic death and not knowing.
Right. Right. They don't realize. Maybe they don't revert. Any thoughts?
Right. It just seems in general, a child passing is not the natural course of things, right? We expect to grow old and pass away, and it seems that when there's a sudden loss like that, there may be, I guess we could say, confusion when it comes to passing, or maybe fear, anxiety, etc.
Right. And I actually looked up a little bit in my church doctrine just to see what my church doctrine said, because I thought I've never really explored this in depth. And it said in there that our spirits are adult, probably mid-20s to mid-30s in age. But I think, and I could be wrong, but I think that a spirit could manifest to you in a way that you would recognize. Because type 3s can manifest in any form they want. We know that Lucy in the family tree manifests as a small girl with black eyes. The thing about type 3s is when they make that body, they're not perfect. There's always something wrong.
Right.
A leg is missing, an ear is missing. So if a spirit manifests to you, one of the things you're supposed to do is give it a good look. And if something's wrong,
be aware.
Be aware.
So does Lucy actually have black eyes, or does she have missing eyes?
I have never seen her like that. I think I've heard it described both ways.
Interesting.
But not just blank. There's black
something.
Black something.
I think last time when we were at the family tree, the description I got was missing eyes, just kind of holes,
Voids.
basically.
Right.
Dark voids.
Some void there.
Yeah, so not that's the impression I get. It's not black eyes like black-eyed children, but just holes of blackness.
That sounds scarier, anyways.
Yeah, it does actually.
And we may be running into Lucy again real soon.
Possibly. We're not going to give you much info on that. You'll just have to wait.
Snap. I had a question. What percentage of the ghosts that you come across do you think are children?
I would say that about 35-ish% of the time we have spirits that say they're children.
That's really high. When you think about, children passing, it's not a very frequent event
Right.
compared to adults that pass.
Right. And so when you get someone that says they're a child, it's like, are you really? Did you really pass as a young child? Are you just saying that because you think it's going to play on my emotions?
And
It's hard to
people are
prove.
more receptive to bringing a child in. Oh,
Yes.
This poor child.
Right. But even if it is a legitimate child spirit, it's nothing evil or demonic. Why such the frequency? Is that just that
I
anxiety?
think in that situation, the numbers would be down considerably to maybe of the ones that you think probably are legitimate, probably 1 in 10.
Probably.
That the others are probably demonic,
More nefarious. Okay.
trying to use that child persona as a way to get into your life.
Right. There's a quote I found by he's a Christian pastor named Jerry Jokum. I'm not sure which denomination he is. And he wrote a book, and I haven't read the book, he had just like a little teaser as I was flipping through web pages. He said, the idea that a child could become a tormented ghost has deep theological implications concerning the nature of the afterlife and even the nature of God. And I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the reasons I really have a hard time with child spirits.
So what you're saying is, tread lightly with children spirits.
Yes. There's a few that I've run across that I think are legit. I have one in my house, and I think she's legit. And the reason why is because I have seen her. I have cousins that have seen her. I have a sister and a niece and nephew that have all seen her.
And her approximate age?
Is about 9 to 10. Because that's what she tells you.
And do you try to talk to her with your dowsing rods?
A time or two, but I try not to just chit-chat with the dowsing rods.
So she just lives her life just alongside you and your family?
Yes, so we also have, her name's Mabel. We also have Emmett in our home. He was grumpy, and we actually kidnapped Mabel.
You better describe that.
We'll tell you. So she was in my aunt's home, which is why my aunt and a couple of my cousins, I don't know if my aunt saw her or not, but a couple of cousins definitely saw this ghost and freaked him out. Then my sister bought my aunt's home. And then my sister and a niece and nephew saw the exact same spirit. It freaked him out. And so I said, do you want us to come get the ghost? And she said, yes, please come get the ghost. And so we did. We got the ghost, brought her to my house.
So you just went over and said, hey, why don't you just come with me?
Yeah, we actually had a different spirit go and talk to her and long story, which I don't want to get into on this podcast.
I'm calling Ghost Child Protective Services because I'm a little worried.
So then my sister calls up like a week or two later, and she says, we haven't seen her really, because they would feel her climb on the bed. You know the feeling of when a child climbs on the bed? They would feel that and no one was in the house, and I've actually felt that.
Every night of my life, people. I got
But
4
they're
kids.
actual child.
They're actual children. They're not ghost children, but every night.
Yeah, so imagine that, but nothing there. And she said, we haven't really felt our little ghost here in a couple of weeks. I said, well, it's because she's at my house. And she said, you stole my ghost? I said, you told me to come get her. So, a little miscommunication there, but she's here now. But when she came, I was upstairs and everybody was gone. Chad was at work, the kids were at school. And I heard Emmett say, hey, kind of that same way that an adult will say, hey, when you're kind of playing with kids. And so he actually likes her. He always wanted to have kids, and he reminds her of her dad.
Oh,
So they kind of play every now and then. So
that's kind of a cute story.
It is.
A cute little haunting story.
It is.
And they have both been offered to cross over and have elected not to.
And they don't want to. I ask them every now and then, and they're like, nope, we're good.
We could start a ghost adoption services.
I know.
Aww.
New webpage.
That's right.
If you run into a child ghost, do not take it home. I know I did, but
Home for the unwanted ghosts.
I would. This is the only one that I would bring home because I know about it.
Because it was like a family ghost with your aunt, your sister.
I know everyone's like, you're such a hypocrite. No, we've got some background with this one. We knew it was legit. And then the other two child spirits that I would say that I think are legit are the two at Asylum 49. Because we've talked about it before on this podcast, but a whole bunch of us were there investigating early on, and we all simultaneously heard these two children laugh. And I don't remember their names.
Wasn't that place a nursing
It was a boy
home?
and a girl. Yes.
It was a hospital, right?
Hospital,
like way back
nursing
when.
home.
In a nursing
Yes.
home.
So I believe that they are there. I'm going to have to go back and look at my notes and see what their names are. I'm drawing a complete blank.
I have no idea.
Christian? Is one of them Christian? I'm going to have to go back and look. If you're interested in reading this Jerry Joachim's book, it is called The Spirit Universe, A Christian View. And I haven't read it. It might be crap, I don't know. But I did like that one little quote that I read. But there's a whole book about it if you're interested.
Nice.
I kind of delved a little bit more into what my church believes because I thought, okay, let's back up I don't really believe in child spirits under the age of 8. And for those of you, if you're new and haven't listened to us before, I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is kind of commonly known as Mormon. It's a nickname, we don't use it. There's a book that we have called Jesus the Christ, and it's written by a man named Talmage. Is it James Talmage? I just know Talmage.
I believe so.
This book is not scripture per se, but if you're talking theology to someone and you quote something out of it and they say, where did you get that? And you say Jesus the Christ, they're not going to argue with you. It's almost scripture in my church. In there it says, and I'm just going to read a direct quote here, Jesus the Christ died in the literal sense in which all men die. He underwent a physical dissolution by which his immortal spirit was separated from his body of flesh and bones, and that body was actually dead. While the corpse lay in Joseph's rock-hewn tomb, the living Christ existed as a disembodied spirit. So I have no reason to not believe that spirits exist. It says so in our church doctrine. But one of our prophets by the name of Joseph F. Smith taught, the spirits of our children are immortal before they came to us, and their spirits, after bodily death, are like as they were before they came. They are as they would have appeared if they had lived in the flesh, to grow to maturity, or to develop their physical bodies to the full stature of their spirits. So I believe that children have spirits. He goes on to say, if you see one of your children that has passed away, it may appear to you in the form in which you would recognize it, like I said earlier, the form of childhood. But if it came to you as a messenger bearing some important truth, it would become perhaps as the spirit of Bishop Edward Hunter's son. He's telling a story about somebody who died when he was a little child in his full-grown manhood and revealed to himself to his father and said, I am your son. So we believe that a child spirit could manifest however it wanted to.
So what you're saying is a spirit is not necessarily a child. Okay, a spirit is eternal. A spirit is there, but it manifests in a way that you can recognize it based upon the purpose of its being there.
Right. And, like we also mentioned, is it could be confused.
Right.
It could, a child could die and be confused and be scared to cross over. There's many reasons, but according to my religion, I do believe that there can be child spirits. But we believe that a child is not accountable for sins before the age of 8. And so, to me, just to have an infant ghost laying there, on the floor, no, that's not going to happen.
Doesn't make sense.
A 2-year-old, no.
Well, I was doing some research and I ran across an odd religion. They're in Ghana. They believe some of the craziest stuff. So if in their family, if they're having bad luck, like money, or it hasn't rained and the crops have gone bad, they blame it on the evil spirit of the child, and they make a phone call, and these people come in and create some concoction out of roots, and they give it to the children and poison the children. Now, this can be a child that's a newborn. They watched it. It was a biography I watched on YouTube, and they actually poisoned a 13-year-old girl. And the guy was laughing. He was like, oh, we told her it was a cure for malaria, and she just drank it, and it killed her. But that's how they do it in Ghana. They're trying to change their ways, but they think anything that goes bad is an evil spirit in a child, and it doesn't matter how old that child can be.
And see, I have issues with that. I think in order for an evil spirit to enter you, you have to let it. You can't just say, all right, come into me. I mean, it's a process.
Right. And it was even women that would claim that the fetus was going to come out as an evil spirit, and then they would kill the baby instantly.
Yeah, see, those are the things that I just call
right.
BS on those, because children are not evil.
Right.
I don't know.
We'd like to think
I've had 2 and 3 year olds do things that make me question that one, but
right. We can't think about our 2 and 3 year olds.
Inherently, children are not evil to that extent, and I call BS on that. So as far as the child spirits that we run into, I think the percentage of ones that are actual children are very low. Yeah, as in they died when they were young and they still are there. I think most of them might appear to us as children because they might think they'll be less scary. Maybe that's just what they remember and like. And I do think that a large portion of those could just be those type 3s trying to gain our sympathies and think they're all cute and have us invite them home. They're looking for that invite.
Right. That was my first thought.
Right. So that's where I am on child spirits. I believe in them with a lot of caveats.
That's fair and safe.
Right. And I feel good about it because my religion says there's child spirits and they can appear to you. So I'm religiously okay.
So we talked about child spirits. What about children who see spirits?
Ooh, what you got?
Well, I mean, my assumption is because they're young and they haven't been jaded, I guess, from this world, that maybe they're a little more sensitive to being able to sense paranormal or things from the other side of the veil.
They haven't dulled their senses.
Exactly.
I think a large, and I don't even want to throw out a percentage because I'd have to guess, but I'd probably say 50, 60% of investigations that we get called on that have children in the home, it's usually the children can see this. You know, my son is saying this, my daughter's seeing this.
Right.
We're just going to throw out the thing we don't have to talk about for very long out there first, is that sometimes as children are developing and they realize, ooh, these things get me attention and these things don't, sometimes a child will say something and the parent will give them attention. There's a monster in my room. And the parents freak out and the kids go, oh, that was fun. We're going to do that again. So if your child says they're seeing something in the room, take them seriously. If you've ever been on an investigation with us, you know that we have an EVP that we will play sometimes. And there's a boy, and this boy, it's not an EVP that we got. It's an EVP that we got permission to use. And the boy is, 10, 11, 12.
I'd say probably 11 or 12.
A little older, kind of hitting that early teenish age. And he kept telling us, Dad, there's something in my room. I'm paraphrasing. And so the dad humors him, takes in I don't know if he takes in a video camera, probably a video camera, but at least like a recorder.
Looked like video surveillance stuff.
They're going through the room, and the boy is, here's this, and that is that. And you hear the boy say something about, I think I saw something move over there. I mean, you hear the boy say something about something that he notices in the room, movement or a shadow or something. And right then, the dad's camera picks up an audible Class A, clear as a bell, full sentence EVP of this creepy, creepy dark voice. In fact, when we play this for people, we say, once you can't unhear this. And it's super creepy. So here's your disclaimer. If you want to sleep tonight, here's your chance to step out. And very few people step out. I want to know how many people can't sleep through the night. But the voice says, I am your worst nightmare. I watch you sleep. And it's just that guttural voice. Creepy as heck. When I first heard it, I couldn't sleep for a night or two. And that would, as a parent hearing that, I would absolutely have a heart attack. If your child says something to you, listen to them because they might actually be seeing something.
Right.
But just because they say they're seeing something doesn't necessarily mean they are.
And don't overreact.
Absolutely.
And not just with this, but with other things. Sometimes, just from a reaction standpoint, kids are very perceptive and they learn. And if they figure that they can get a rise out of you for some reason, they may do the same thing, even though the occurrence or the stimulus that caused it isn't really there. But they're pretty good at training their parents.
Right. They're basically an attention grab, right? And if they say certain things, mom and dad are going to listen. They're going to react.
Right. And they might just say something one time, just saying it, but they get this reaction. They go, oh, that was fun.
Especially if it's an overreaction.
Right.
Right.
One of the things I was wondering about, and we ran into this in an investigation just a few weeks ago, was the idea, you talked about, can children see spirits? You hear lots and lots of stories about children and their invisible friends.
Right.
Is that a spirit, a child spirit, or is there someone there that they're actually seeing? Because we had that in an investigation, like we said, a couple of weeks ago, and the spirit guide was the name of the child's invisible friend when they were young. And now they're in, she was 15, 16, something like that.
Right. Way too old for an imaginary friend. And because imaginary friend is a very brief period of time. And the thing about kids is you get that age where they're just starting to talk, between ages of 2 and 4, when they just say those really cute, super innocent things. But I'm sorry, sometimes your cute little toddler can be super creepy and say super creepy things. So my oldest, when he was in that age, about 4 years old, he was outside playing. And the house I lived in had a fence all the way around it, and I could see him while I was doing dishes. And my mom would say, just let him, kids need to be a little on their own. As long as you can see him, he can play outside by himself. And I had about 800 heart attacks. But I could see him, and I thought, okay, I'm going to be a good mom and give him a little bit of free range. And so he's outside playing, and a few minutes later he comes in and he goes, Mom. And in the house that I lived in, there was the log cabin that the pioneers built in 1849 when they first came.
And the new main house was built
in 1879 or something. Okay, so the house was old, definitely haunted. We can talk, that could be a whole other podcast, my haunted house. But he had been out by this log cabin. And he came in and he said, Mom, who are the old people in the rocking chairs? Now, to a 3-year-old, someone that's 35 is going to be old, right? And we had some neighbors that were probably at the time in their 50s, mid-50s. And so I thought, he's talking about them. And I said, it's these people. And he goes, no. And I said, well, show me where they were. And so he took me by the hand. He took me out to the corner of this cabin, which was nowhere near the fence that we would share with our neighbors. He says, they were right here. Who are they? And I thought, well, they're the ghosts. But I'm not going to tell my 3-year-old, they're just the ghosts. Don't worry about it. And, so that was fun.
Have you watched that program, Psychic Kids?
I have not.
That played on A&E. That, I think that played a few years ago, and it went across a bunch of different kids that could see spirits and how that was affecting them because they would be terrified, not knowing why these spirits would be coming to them to get help. It was a pretty good show. It would help and teach the children how to use their gifts. But in one of those, there's also the children who remember their past lives. So they're seeing ghosts basically of themselves in previous lives. Have you ran across some of those?
I have not personally, but I have heard stories.
There's some pretty good stories.
They're pretty cool. So I am not a child psychologist in any way, shape, or form. I have 7 children, but, they're all different. And you think you get one figured out, and the next one comes along, and you got no clue. Doc's like, I'm laughing because it's so true.
It's painful.
But I would suggest if you have a child that's, saying that they're seeing something, one, don't overreact. Go check it out. And then I would just keep an eye on it because it's a phase and it will pass. If you don't overreact and it's a phase, it'll go away eventually.
Right. One of the things I was thinking about, too, is that a lot of these kids who claim to see spirits that are sensitive, there's some attributes sometimes you see with these kids. They tend to be a little high anxiety. They get emotionally drained easily just from encounters or seeing, interacting with people that have claimed to be sensitive. That's kind of the general feels that they're empathic. Sometimes other people's emotions can just be a super big, energy suck for them as well.
Right. So you just need to be careful how you approach it. Just don't get too emotionally freaked out. Very calm, ask them to show you, and then just kind of watch. My youngest had an imaginary friend for about 3 or 4 months, and then it went away. Now, whether it was real or not, I'm not sure. We did have a medium kind of check it out. She said it was just an imaginary friend, and so we just kind of let it go, and it went away. We had the child draw a picture of what this imaginary friend looked like, and it looked like one of those plague doctors with the big long beak, and it was a little creepy.
That is creepy.
So either we had a really creepy ghost in our house, or my daughter just has like this super creepy imagination, one of the two, but whatever.
When my son was young, probably 7, 8, he had bunk beds, and he could feel something below pressing on his bed, and it would terrify him to the point where he would quit sleeping in that top bunk. And he would tell me there was one time when we used to have landlines that were hooked to the wall, and I was on a landline and I was pacing back and forth in the hall talking on the phone, and he could see some ghost walking behind me, giving me rabbit ears behind my head, and my son would just sit there and laugh at him. So
right. And then there was a child psychologist I read a few things about, and his take, I didn't give it a whole lot of credence because his was, it's never paranormal. It's always some psychological thing. And I was like, okay, it's not always paranormal either.
Right.
But there are times when it can be. But he did say, unless there's real distress, do not worry. So, if a child is really to the point of, I'm not going to sleep in that room, or, hysterical, just give it some time, be calm about it. It'll probably go away. But if they won't sleep in the bed, if they won't sleep in their room by themselves, they're crying, they're terrified, then
might be time to get some sage and
then give us a call and we'll come check it out.
Right.
Oftentimes when children see spirits, there's a few times where it's something scary that they don't know what it is. But I think most of the time when a child sees a spirit, they claim to see dead relatives. Have you guys heard these stories before?
Yeah, I think that would make sense because that's, kids haven't been on the earth that long. They don't have a lot of relationship connections, and, maybe the tie to family is pretty strong.
Right, and my religious beliefs are that they're so innocent that the veil, as I call it, is thin. They're more apt to see things because of their innocence. More, like you said, a little more susceptible to see things. But one of the interesting things researchers have found is oftentimes when children see these relatives that have passed on, they're relatives that have passed before the child was born. And there's no way they would know. So there's one story that goes, this lady had a daughter who was 3 years old, and she started telling the family that she was being woken up in the night by a man who would tickle her feet. They just figured, she's dreaming, she's just having this recurring dream every once in a while. And then one day, they were just going through some pictures, and they found this picture of what would be this child's great-grandparents on their wedding day, so they would have been younger. And this little 3-year-old pointed at the grandfather and says, "That's him. That's the man who tickles my feet." And this grandfather passed away when the 3-year-old's mother was 6.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so there's no way that that little girl would have known this man. It wasn't a memory of, just some little vague memory from when she was little, because she was little.
Right.
But this man passed away when her mother was about her same age.
Wow.
And a man named Tucker, I don't know, I should have written a little bit more of who he was.
Just Tucker.
Just Tucker. So Tucker says, when you start to hear enough stories like that, where he does, you start to say, there's something to this. And, some people can poo-poo it, but there's several people out there that have said, I've heard so many stories that there's something to this. Oftentimes kids will grow out of it. So if it kind of creeps you out, your child's sensitive. Most of them are, I believe. And most of the time it goes away. Sometimes it doesn't. And those are people that are, mediums and sensitive. Sometimes it goes away and it can come back if you work on that.
Yeah, I was thinking as we were talking about that and the idea of children being able to see things and entities and that kind of thing, and it gets back to me a little bit of The Sixth Sense and that movie where the young boy was able to see things and hear things, and it's very interesting. I wouldn't call it a paranormal documentary, but I think it's got a lot of really good things about it. Of what are they trying to communicate? What are they trying to do?
Right. When it comes to sensing spirits, you'd probably be Bruce Willis and not even know you're dead. Spoiler alert.
If that spoiled that movie, you need to get caught up in your movies, because that's
like
old.
20 years ago, maybe.
Something like that.
I'll take a look
Wow.
at this. But
Really?
yeah,
Was that 20 years ago?
I don't know. We'll find
Maybe
out.
more.
Oh, my.
Yeah, but Chad would
Oh.
totally be Bruce Willis at that point. That's about
Right.
how good your spirit sensing acumen is. Mine too. I mean, I'm with
You're
you
right
in
there
that
with
boat.
me, I know.
I'm with you in that boat.
Wow.
So I have some stories. You want to hear some stories?
Let's hear some stories.
Okay. So this one's called The Pajama-Clad Boy. So there was a family, and they were looking at some condos to buy. And they had a little girl, her named Claire, and 3 years old. Not the same 3-year-old as before, different 3-year-old. And they took her with them because they kind of wanted to see if their daughter would be comfortable with the house that they were buying as well. And, because they figure it's going to be her home too, so let's make sure she digs it. So, they did a walkthrough of this home, and they ended up buying it. It was a Chicago brick 3-flat. It was built in 1911. And they all walked into the house. Everyone just seemed to be very comfortable in there. They thought this is going to be awesome. So one evening, the mom asked Claire if she thought the house was a good home for her. And the little girl said yes. And the little boy that lives here is really nice too.
Oh.
And the mom did what she should. She was like, whoa, but she kept calm. She didn't make a big deal about it. And she said, what do you mean? And she says, there's a little boy in his pajamas that's in the dining room. And the little girl said that he would wave at her. And he was about her same age, and he was the only one there. And the mom said that the little girl knew his name, but the mom couldn't remember what his name is, and that he was afraid of water.
Wow.
So...
Did they move into the house?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was after
Sorry.
they'd bought the house,
Yeah,
right?
that was after. Yeah, they've been living there.
Oh, okay.
So there's one called The Cemetery Sighting. And the author of this says that her son was about 2 at the time, and they were driving past the cemetery, and he said, "Look, Mama, dead people." And she just replied as any mom would, "Yes, darling. Cemetery is.
There are dead people there.
There are dead people there."
Right.
And he said, "Kids." Remember, he's 2, so, the language skills aren't the best yet. And she said the way he said it was just so matter of fact. And she kind of looked over and she said, sure enough, they were passing the children's section. So she was curious. And she's just said, "Are the kids happy or sad?" And he says, "Happy, Mama. They're running around that daddy." And she said, "All I saw was a man standing alone with his head dropped, like he was, there with
Mourning.
his own child, mourning his own
Yeah.
child." And she said it honestly warmed her heart, knowing that the spirit children were there kind of dancing. And she didn't know the story of, who he was or who he was looking at or what went down, but that's
Right.
just what this child said.
Oh.
So here's another one. She's a mom of one. She says, "We bought our current house from a man who was married for 40 plus years. And his wife had passed away just a few years before they bought the house. And one evening they had a 2.5-year-old into bed, and he said, 'Mama, night-night to the grandma.' And he pointed kind of back behind her towards the room that would have been the master bedroom. So this little boy could see the grandma. There's another little boy who is 2.5, and he would say ghost and point to the dining room table. And they didn't really think much about it. And she said, "One day I mentioned Mr. Hutchinson to someone while giving a history of the house, and Leo said," that was her son, "Mr. Hutchinson, my ghost friend?"
Oh,
He's 2.5,
right.
okay? And 2.5s can be fairly,
Precocious.
and have quite a good vocabulary. I had a couple 2.5-year-olds that I thought something was wrong with them because they couldn't say anything until they were 3, but some can be very chatty and pick up on language skills a lot faster. And they actually confirmed with a house cleaner that they had, one of their maids that would come in, that there was someone attached to the home, and a grandfatherly figure had been seen quite often in this home. And yeah, so just, this little 2.5-year-old just, "Oh, Mr. Hutchinson, my friend." And the mom's like, "How did you know that?"
It's comforting to know that not all ghosts are bad or mean
Or scary.
or scary. Maybe bumps in the night are just family
Bumps.
members, or maybe a bump in the night's just a bump. But if it were to be a ghost, maybe it's just somebody trying to catch
Mr.
your attention.
Hutchinson.
Maybe it's Mr. Hutchinson. But I think that really does put things in perspective. I think in general, in life, I think most people are good.
Mhm.
I would assume that most ghosts would be good.
Well, and sometimes you wonder, I don't know how the hereafter works. And you almost wonder if a new family moves in the house and the old owner
Owners.
of the house might just go, "Hey, who's in our house?" and might just pop in to see who's there. It doesn't necessarily mean your house is haunted.
I've wanted to do that while I was alive. Go back to where I lived and be like, I wonder who's living in this place.
There's a house, and I think we've chatted about this before on the podcast, but there's a house that I spent time in as a child that is fabulously haunted. I'm convinced of it, and I would love to go ghost hunt it, but you can't exactly knock on the door and say, "I think your house is super haunted. Can I come ghost
Yeah.
hunt?"
Ah, you live in a haunted house. Can I come in?
I've thought about that going back to the home I grew up in. Not really sure how to approach that.
So there's got a couple more. So there's one, this story is called The Midnight Playmate. The mom says that at the time, her 4-year-old would tell her about a little girl that wanted to play with her. And this little girl would want to play any hours of the day. It wasn't just like right after school, midnight, 2 in, 4 in, didn't matter what time. And the mom actually left the little ghost some toys in an upstairs closet so that she could play, and it's midnight, but you can play with these toys type of a thing. And she had a little stuffed lamb and a stuffed duck, and every morning she would find them moved to different areas, to places that she hadn't left them. And she knew that it wasn't the 4-year-old moving the toys because they were in a different room. It wasn't she'd leave them at night, she'd put her kids down, she'd leave the toys out, and they were in a completely different room, and they would be moved, and these little children would still be asleep. The mom would go check them in the morning, and she said it wouldn't have been her kids because she would have heard them.
That's Annabelle creepy.
That is a little creepy. That would probably spook me out a little bit.
Yeah.
There's one called The Door Slammer. There was a 4-year-old, and this 4-year-old would tell stories about little girl in the home who would shut the door and turn off the lights. But he couldn't tell her where she would go or what she really looked like. It's like he knew she was there, but he couldn't describe her. And the mom said, I don't talk about ghosts or anything that would give my son this idea. And I think most parents don't talk to their 4-year-olds about ghosts because you're begging for your kids not to sleep and be in your bed all night long, right?
Tell them about ghosts. They'll love it.
Let's talk about monsters and Dracula and ghosts and then have a good night's sleep. Yeah, that will never happen.
That's what Scooby-Doo does, though, right? Scooby-Doo taught us all about ghosts.
True.
Yeah, but it's always some dude in a mask. At the end of the day, right? It's
This
never
is
an
true.
actual ghost.
It's all, yeah.
I would have got away with this wasn't for those pesky kids.
See, I tried to get
They're
Scooby-Doo in
meddling
last
pup.
time, but we got it in this time. So the mom says, the last time the little girl was here, I heard the door slam. I ran in and asked him if he had closed it. He told me, no, the little girl did because she didn't want to play.
Oh,
And then my last ghost story. Ready for this one?
all right.
I'm actually getting, not like scared creepy, but I kind of want to,
Giving yourself goosebumps.
I kind of want my bathroom door to slam right now.
Great.
So this one, the lady talks about her father-in-law who'd passed away several years before her son was born. So this grandpa never got to meet grandson in life, okay? He had actually died from the flu, and her husband always felt guilty because he had been the one to share the sickness with him. So basically the son got the dad sick, dad died from the flu, and grandson never got to meet him. So there's a little bit of guilt feeling in there. But no one does that on purpose, right? At
Not
least
intentional.
No.
Die of the flu?
good
No,
person.
not usually.
Thanks, Doc.
I think I'm going to go give my dad the flu.
Is that a clinical?
that
I'm
he
just
will
going to
die.
say, it's not
opinion.
generally the approach I see most people taking to end-of-life care. So I'm going to go get the flu.
Right. And I think in general, people don't say, I'm going to kill my dad, so I'm going to go breathe my flu germs on him. I
Right.
mean, who does that?
No.
There might be one person that tried it. But in general, that's not a thing, right? But Dad was feeling a little guilt because he had given Dad the flu. So they'd never really talked to the son about the grandpa, mostly because he was very little and because Dad felt a little bit of guilt, bringing grandpa up. But one morning, this little boy woke up and he just said, Daddy, Papa Don wants me to tell you he's doing fine. Just, boom. They hadn't talked about it. They hadn't discussed it, just kind of out of the blue. And so they said, describe Grandpa to us. And they said that he did, to a T. They're like, there's no way that isn't, Grandpa, based on his description. He'd never seen a photo of him. He said he was standing by a fast car with a cloud of smoke around him, and that made perfect sense because this father-in-law raced sports cars and smoked heavily his whole life. And so,
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think children can definitely spirits. This one, for example, sounds more like Grandpa sending a message,
Yeah.
where some of them are spirits that are in the home for whatever reason. I
Right.
like these kind of stories.
Yeah.
I love these kind of stories.
It's
That
like
one's
a
really cool.
feel-good child ghost story. All right.
Right. So I was talking about the children that have passed or see spirit. There is a family who had 2 girls, and the girls they were killed in a car accident. And then a few years later, the mother was pregnant with twins. And when she had twins, it was 2 girls. They had birthmarks that were similar to the other girls that had passed away. They would play with the same toys that the girls that had passed away and had all of the same memories of the daughters that had passed away previously.
And if you're listening to this, what you can't see is I'm over here nodding my head vigorously because I've heard this same story before.
Yeah, once you get on YouTube, it's pretty easy. That story pops up quite a bit, but it's quite an amazing story.
So here's one, I don't know if you want to call it a fact, but here's a generally adhered to belief that kind of hooks child spirits and children who see spirits together. And a couple researchers have both said that ghost children love to connect, but they don't connect just to anyone because think about kids. Kids are kind of suspicious and ghost children are kind of suspicious. And so they're not just going to walk up to anybody and be like, hey, how's it hanging? And so usually a child spirit will try to connect with an actual child. And this is something that I have noticed. Child spirits that I've run into on residential investigations that I think have been legit usually play kind of a hide and seek. And when I say hide and seek, it's, they'll kind of peek around something at you. And I can usually just feel it. Sometimes I can see it. But they, it's kind of they'll look and dart back and look and dart back. And there's several places I found on the internet that if there is a child ghost, they usually won't just come up to you and just start talking. They have to start feeling comfortable with you. And if there's a child in the home, they will usually approach the child first before they will approach an adult.
That's how it worked in the house that I grew up in. That's how we first noticed he played hide and seek with us.
A little more shy, a little more timid.
Yep. So I kind of find this fascinating.
Very fun topic.
Yes. So a couple reasons why child spirits could stay. Anchored energy. So what that means is some children feel like they can't move on because they've been anchored here by overwhelming mourning by family.
Like their mother is so upset that they've lost the child, they won't leave their mom.
Right, because they just feel like it would just be doing her a disservice to leave.
Sure.
She's so sad that they just have to stay here
to comfort.
To help her. And once the mother passes away, then they feel like, okay, now I can go.
And then they'll go together.
Right. And it's interesting because on occasion, I think maybe a handful of times in the last 8 or so years, when we have found a child spirit, they have been with a relative. And so when I read that, I thought, oh, that makes sense. And I think we've encountered that a couple of times. They also might stay because they got into mischief and something went wrong, which caused their death. And so then they're afraid they're going to be punished.
Huh.
Mom told me not to do this, and now look what happened, and I am going to be in so much trouble.
I see. So not the trauma of not knowing that they have passed, but the fear of getting in trouble because they've passed.
Because of what they've done.
Oh, dear.
Isn't that sad?
That is terrible.
I think that's sad. And like adult ghosts, sometimes they feel like they've got some unfinished business. Children really try to please their parents. Sometimes they don't know how to do it very good. I had children that, bless their little hearts, were trying to kill the spiders in the window well, and in doing so, they flooded the basement, which was awesome. But they really tried to make their parents happy. Yeah. And, maybe they were sent on an errand, and they just didn't feel like they got that errand done, and they feel like they need to stay to complete the task that they were given. And as we said before, sometimes the child is confused, so they're not sure that they're dead, and we get that with adults too.
Right.
And sometimes that confusion can keep them here.
That was an interesting topic. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And I wanted to remind you that you can get your Supernatural Hour swag at advancedparanormal.com or TeePublic. I think our website's a bit more interesting, though. There's a lot of fun stuff on there.
I need to check and see if there's hats on there, because I have a tapestry now.
I'm pretty sure there is. I got a mug, and it's my favorite mug, so there's that.
You need to bring it so you can look like Larry King.
That's what I'm saying.
Because he's
died.
passed, so you need to carry on.
Oh, yeah. COVID-19.
You need to carry on the legacy of the
That's
mug.
Right. All right, I'll bring the mug next time.
And suspenders. Or suspenders.
And suspenders.
Wow. Wait for YouTube to see that.
Oh, well, luckily this is audio and not video, so we should be good.
Yeah,
it's a little shout out to Larry King.
Get that little special
Right.
camera.
He was
May
kind
he
of
rest
awesome.
in peace.
Yes, R.I.P. That was a sad one today.
Stay spooky, my haunty friends.
Love you, Nicholas.
See ya.
Have a good one.
You've been listening to the Supernatural Hour at AdvancedParanormal.com. The Supernatural Hour is part of the Radio Ronin network found at RadioRonin.com. Copyright 2021 by Advanced Paranormal Services.